Most men lose attraction before they ever had a chance to create it. Not because they're unattractive, not because they lack money, status, or confidence, but because the moment a woman enters the room, they start performing. They start trying to be noticed. And strangely, that's the exact moment they become forgettable. Here's the truth most men never hear. Attractive men rarely chase attention. In fact, the less they need it, the more people naturally give it to them. And women notice this instantly, even when they don't consciously realize it. That's because female psychology is deeply connected to emotional perception. Women don't just respond to what you say, they respond to the energy behind why you're saying it. And this changes everything. Think about the men who naturally stand out in a room. Usually, they aren't the loudest. They aren't desperately trying to impress everyone. They don't constantly interrupt conversations just to prove they're funny or smart. Sometimes, they barely speak at all. Yet somehow people keep looking at them. Women, especially. Why? Because calm attention is powerful. But craving attention feels emotionally unstable. Most men don't realize this. The man constantly seeking validation unconsciously communicates something dangerous. He tells the world his confidence depends on external reactions. Every joke he forces, every story he exaggerates, every attempt to look cool quietly reveals that he needs approval to feel important. Women sense this faster than men think. And here's where it gets interesting. Women are often attracted to emotional self-sufficiency before physical appearance even fully registers. A man who seems internally grounded creates curiosity. He feels rare, safe, strong. Not because he dominates the room, but because he doesn't need the room to validate him. That subtle difference changes how people experience you. You've probably seen this happen before without understanding it. A guy walks into a social setting. He isn't flashy. He isn't trying to steal attention, but he looks comfortable in his own skin. His movements are relaxed. He listens more than he talks. He smiles slowly instead of nervously laughing at everything. And women naturally start observing him. Not because he demanded attention, because he wasn't chasing it. Pay attention to this part because it explains something most dating advice completely misses. Attention-seeking behavior creates pressure, emotional pressure. When a man desperately wants to be liked, people feel responsible for emotionally rewarding him. And that feels exhausting. Women especially are highly sensitive to emotional pressure in social interactions. They can sense when a man is trying too hard to impress them. And the strange thing is, the harder he tries, the less authentic he feels. It's like watching someone audition for approval instead of simply existing confidently. That energy quietly kills attraction. Now compare that to the man who's fully engaged in the moment without trying to force reactions. He's not calculating every sentence. He's not watching her face after every joke hoping she validates him. He isn't constantly trying to prove his value. Ironically, that's exactly what makes him valuable. Because confidence is most believable when it doesn't ask to be confirmed. Read that again mentally. This is why women often become fascinated by men who appear emotionally composed. There's mystery there, curiosity, a sense that his identity isn't controlled by outside opinions. And female attraction is heavily connected to emotional intrigue. People chase what feels emotionally difficult to fully access. But there's another layer most men never see. A man who constantly seeks attention usually loses awareness of the room around him. He becomes focused on himself. His goal becomes being seen instead of actually seeing others. Women pick up on this immediately. They notice when a man is only listening so he can speak again. They notice when compliments feel strategic instead of genuine. They notice when confidence feels rehearsed. And once she senses performance, emotional attraction weakens. Because authentic presence is more attractive than social performance. Here's a simple example. Imagine two men talking to the same woman. The first man keeps trying to entertain her. He talks fast. He over-explains stories. He constantly checks her reactions. If she looks away for 2 seconds, his energy shifts because he fears losing her attention. The second man speaks calmly. He doesn't rush silence. He asks questions because he's genuinely curious, not because he memorized conversation tricks. If she gets distracted, he doesn't panic. His emotional state stays steady. Which man feels more emotionally attractive? Usually the second one. Not because he's playing games, because emotional steadiness creates psychological safety and intrigue at the same time. That combination is powerful. Most men think attraction is built through impressing women. But often, attraction grows when a woman feels emotionally relaxed around you. And oddly enough, attention-seeking behavior makes relaxation impossible because it creates hidden tension beneath the interaction. Here's where it gets deeper. Women are constantly observing emotional congruence. In simple words, they watch whether your behavior matches your emotional state. If a man acts confident but secretly needs approval, women often feel that mismatch instinctively. His words may sound strong, but his energy asks for validation. And human beings trust energy before words. That's why some men say all the right things yet still fail to create attraction. Meanwhile, another man says very little, but his calm emotional presence becomes magnetic. You can't fake inner stability for long. And this is exactly why emotionally grounded men naturally stand out in today's world. Most people are addicted to attention. Social media amplified this dramatically. Everyone performs. Everyone seeks validation. Everyone wants to appear important. So when a man genuinely doesn't need constant recognition, he immediately feels different. Rare things attract attention naturally. Think about this carefully. A lion never has to convince people he's dangerous. A mountain never announces its size. Real power rarely screams. It doesn't need to. And female psychology responds deeply to this principle. The man who's comfortable not being the center of attention often becomes the center of attention anyway. Because emotional independence is incredibly noticeable in a world full of emotional hunger. Now, this doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. That's where many men misunderstand the concept. Some guys hear this idea and suddenly become silent statues, pretending not to care about anything. But emotional detachment is not confidence. It's usually fear, disguised as control. Women notice that too. True confidence feels warm, relaxed, and grounded. It doesn't desperately pull attention toward itself, but it also doesn't push people away. It simply exists without emotional neediness. That balance matters. And here's something almost nobody talks about. Women often test for attention-seeking behavior subconsciously. Not because they're manipulative, but because attraction naturally searches for emotional strength. A woman may tease you slightly. She may delay responding. She may shift attention elsewhere briefly in a social setting. And in those moments, your reaction reveals everything. Do you become emotionally reactive? Do you suddenly try harder? Do you seek reassurance? Or do you remain emotionally centered? Pay attention to this part because it changes the entire dynamic. When a man remains calm without becoming cold, he communicates abundance psychologically, not necessarily money or status. Emotional abundance. He signals that his identity remains stable regardless of temporary attention shifts. That's incredibly attractive. Because emotional control creates trust. And trust creates attraction faster than most men realize. Here's a reality many men struggle to accept. Women are not usually attracted to the man who wants them the most. They're attracted to the man who values himself, regardless of whether he gets them or not. That subtle distinction changes your entire energy. One man says internally, I hope she likes me. Another says, I'll enjoy this interaction, but my worth isn't dependent on the outcome. Women feel the difference instantly. One energy chases approval, the other invites connection. An invitation is far more attractive than pursuit. Now let's talk about silence for a second, because this is where many men accidentally destroy attraction. Nervous men fear silence. They rush to fill every pause because silence makes them uncomfortable. But emotionally confident men understand something important. Silence can create tension in a good way. A calm pause communicates emotional control. It shows you're not panicking for validation. It allows eye contact to breathe. It creates space for emotional curiosity. And women often interpret this as confidence, because confidence rarely rushes. Most men talk too much when they're nervous. Attractive men usually reveal less and observe more. That doesn't mean being boring. It means being intentional. Here's where it gets fascinating psychologically. The human brain values what feels emotionally earned. When a man constantly overshares, overexplains, and overperforms for attention, there's no mystery left. No emotional space for curiosity to grow. But when a man reveals himself gradually while remaining emotionally present, women naturally lean in more. Curiosity fuels attraction. And mystery is not pretending to be unavailable. It's simply refusing to overexpose yourself for validation. There's a huge difference. Most men don't realize how much their need for attention leaks through small behaviors. Constantly checking if she's impressed. Name-dropping achievements unnecessarily. Talking louder around attractive women. Fishing for compliments. Posting online mainly for validation. Trying too hard to appear desired by others. Women notice these patterns. And ironically, the men trying hardest to look attractive often appear least secure. Meanwhile, the man who quietly enjoys his own life without needing constant recognition becomes psychologically compelling. His energy feels harder to manipulate, more grounded, more real, and authenticity is becoming increasingly rare. That's why it stands out so strongly. Let me give you a real-world example. You've probably seen a man enter a room and immediately begin performing socially. He dominates conversations, forces humor, exaggerates stories, and tries to impress everyone simultaneously. At first, he may appear charismatic, but after a while, the energy becomes draining because it feels forced. Now think about the quieter man nearby. He isn't invisible, he's simply selective. When he speaks, people listen because his words don't feel attention-hungry. His laughter feels genuine. His reactions feel calm instead of exaggerated. Over time, guess who often becomes more attractive? The second man. Because emotional calm creates depth. And depth is what many women secretly crave in a world full of shallow performance. Here's where many viewers will misunderstand this message, so listen carefully. This is not about pretending not to care. It's about genuinely building a life and identity that no longer depends on constant female validation. That's the real shift, because once a man stops obsessively trying to be attractive, he often becomes more attractive naturally. Why? Because his focus changes, he listens better. He observes more. He becomes emotionally present instead of mentally performing. His confidence stops feeling forced because it's rooted in self-respect rather than approval-seeking. And women can feel when a man respects himself. Not through words, through behavior, the way he handles rejection, the way he carries silence, the way he doesn't collapse emotionally when attention shifts away from him. That emotional steadiness communicates maturity powerfully, especially today. Because modern life trained many people to chase constant stimulation and validation. Notifications, likes, attention, reactions, approval. So a man who remains emotionally grounded without needing external confirmation feels psychologically rare. And rare qualities create attraction. Here's another truth most men ignore. Women often feel safest around men who are emotionally secure enough not to force outcomes. A man who desperately needs attention may also desperately need control. But a grounded man allows interactions to unfold naturally. He doesn't pressure conversations. He doesn't rush emotional intimacy. He doesn't try to manufacture connection. That patience creates emotional comfort. And comfort creates openness. Now think about your own experiences. Have you ever met someone who instantly felt calming to be around? Not because they entertained you constantly, but because they seemed fully comfortable with themselves. Their energy didn't demand anything from you emotionally. That feeling is magnetic. And this is where attraction becomes less about techniques and more about emotional state. Because women are often reacting less to your lines and more to your emotional presence. That's why two men can say the exact same sentence and create completely different emotional reactions. Energy changes interpretation. Confidence without attention seeking feels grounded. Confidence mixed with validation, hunger feels performative. And women instinctively separate the two. Most men spend years trying to learn what to say to women. Very few learn how to stop emotionally chasing reactions. That's the deeper lesson. Attractive men are not obsessed with appearing attractive every second. They aren't constantly monitoring themselves through other people's eyes. They're engaged with life itself, their purpose, their environment, their experiences. And because their attention isn't desperately reaching outward, people naturally become more curious about them, especially women, because emotional independence is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. Now, here's the irony. The less a man needs to prove himself, the easier it becomes for others to see his value. That's why some men walk into rooms unnoticed for 5 minutes, then slowly become the most interesting person there. Their presence unfolds naturally instead of aggressively demanding attention immediately. And lasting attraction usually grows slowly like that, not through forced performance, but through emotional consistency. Pay attention to this final part because it ties everything together. Women notice men who don't seek attention because emotionally secure people are rare. Most people are unconsciously asking the world, "Please validate me." But the man who already respects himself communicates something different without even speaking. He says, "I'm already okay." That energy changes how people feel around you. It removes pressure, it creates mystery, it builds trust, and most importantly, it makes your attention feel valuable because it isn't given away desperately. That's the secret many men spend years missing. Attraction isn't always created by chasing attention. Sometimes attraction begins the moment you stop needing it. And once you truly understand that, your entire presence changes. Not because you learned a trick, but because you stopped performing and started becoming emotionally grounded. Women notice that immediately, even if they never explain it out loud. So the next time you enter a room, stop asking yourself how to impress everyone. Ask something deeper instead. Am I comfortable enough with myself to not need attention at all? Because that answer quietly shapes every interaction you have. And strangely enough, that's usually the moment people start noticing you the most.